In life, we encounter people every day, all of whom have stories to share. We rarely take the time to ask people their personal stories, many of which will touch, move, and inspire us in some way. Matt has a passion for making authentic connections and learning about people from all walks of life. He has lived a life of giving back to the community and making a difference in people's lives. Are you ready to meet fascinating people and hear some inspiring stories? The Matt Hilton Show will introduce you to a world of possibilities you never knew existed. Sit back, be present, and enjoy. Here's your host, Matt Hilton.
Hey everyone, Matt Hilton here, the host of the Matt Hilton Show. Thanks for tuning in today. Today's guest is a friend of mine, and you don't want to miss his story. He's going to share a lot about his childhood and growing up, and you're also going to hear about where he is today. Thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for a word from our sponsor.
Inspired, experienced, customer-focused. Find a mortgage that fits your needs with Maria Leach at First United Bank Mortgage, specializing in construction and closing all types of loans, including jumbo, portfolio, conventional, FHA, and VA. A tenured team, outstanding service, competitive programs. Finance your dreams with Maria Leach at First United Bank Mortgage. mleach.firstunitedteam.com, 214-316-7915. mleach at firstunitedbank.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Matt Hilton Show. I am Matt Hilton, your host, and today is a guest that I met online. We were taking a personal development leadership course via Zoom, and I saw Jesse amongst the audience on Zoom and realized here recently that he lived in Plano. So I reached out to him and wanted to hear more of his story, and he's with us here today. Jesse Ostler is here. And thank you for joining us, Jesse.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. So tell us a little bit about Landmark. That's Landmark Worldwide. You've been involved in it for a while, you've been involved longer than I have. And so what got you involved in Landmark?
Well, I mean, I've been a student and a coach in a lot of different courses and helped with like some of the production aspects of it as well, with putting on the different forums and things like that. But what got me into it, my best friend got his girlfriend back, and that was never going to happen. Like, I study psychology, I study people, and they were never in a million years going to work out. Since I met him, it was his biggest mistake in life was that he lost his girlfriend. And
through taking the Landmark course, he got his girlfriend back?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, so he told me, he's like, yeah, I go, so his girl, I'll just tell you a story. His name's Dennis, her name's Jen. Hopefully I can use their names. And I hadn't seen Dennis in about a year. It's one of those things where every time I see him, it's like, how's work going? Oh, good. I'm number 2 in my company. Okay, cool. How's Jen? He goes, oh, good. We're dating. And I'm like, dating? Like, what does that mean?
Right.
Like, sneaking around in the garage? Like, what are we talking about here? Because they were never going to, in my opinion, never get back together. He's like, no, we're dating as in like, I pick her up on Thursday nights and her family's cool with it. And I got real mad at him. I was like, dude, this is the one thing you've wanted your whole life, since I've met you, and you didn't even tell this to me? Like, what's going on, man? And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, I've kind of been busy and your ex-girlfriend hates me, so we haven't seen each other in a year. I was like, oh yeah, that's true. And then I was just like, nah, dude. Like, not in a million years, there's no way that this happened. Like, this is a miracle. Like, what happened? And he goes, I did this thing called Landmark. And I'm like, a landmark? Like a landmark, like you see a landmark? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, and that's how you got your girlfriend back? And he's like, yeah. And I said, you swear that's the thing that changed? He's like, oh yeah, definitely. And I'm like, well, I want to know more about it. He's like, well, of everybody I know, you need it more than anybody else. And he was spot on.
Now, why would he say that? Why would he say that?
Oh, I was a train wreck. Yeah, I was a train wreck. I was living in the moment for sure, like only in the moment, if that makes sense. And at the same time, was totally reacting. I didn't know it, but I was reacting, and he didn't know it either, but I was reacting to like decisions I'd made about life when I was a really scared, upset 8.5-year-old boy. And I got that by lunchtime on day 1 of the 3-day forum, and I called him up and I go, hey, left him a message. I said, dude, I got my money's worth. It's lunchtime. We're on our first break. I literally completed all that stuff. And everything from here on out is just gravy. And then after the forum, I was like, is this a cult? Like, what's going on here? Because I was actually raised in a cult. That's the other part of it.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. I was like, is this a cult? Like, these people are way too happy. Like, what's going on here? You know? And so I decided I would get into assisting so that I could like see the man, like the Wizard of Oz, you know, you want to see the man behind the curtain. So I started volunteering or assisting on different courses for a couple of years until I got to actually sit on some courses with some real higher, you know, upper ups that were doing like leadership courses and stuff. And then I satisfied myself that it was like authentic from the ground up.
Yeah.
And that's when I actually went into it more.
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, it usually is.
So this is going to be a jam-packed show today, ladies and gentlemen. So let's go back to childhood.
Okay.
You were raised, you said in your own words, in a cult. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I was actually raised Jehovah's Witness.
Okay.
And my mother and my brother are both very much still in it. My father was until he passed. The rest, my parents converted before I was born, about 5 or 6 years before I was born. And I believed it like 100%. It's essentially, for those of you who don't know, it's essentially just like a fundamentalist Christian type of very like a righteous type of...
Very rigid.
Type of upbringing.
Yeah, I lived next door to Jehovah's Witness family growing up.
Oh yeah.
For 20-something years. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And I didn't leave until I was 26 and a half.
okay. So tell us more about Jehovah's Witness. Like, I think different religions are interesting because, as you and I discussed over lunch in the recent past, nobody knows.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows what's going to happen after we die. I mean, we have...
Well, they don't have any proof. They
don't
all
have any
think they
proof.
know. They think they know.
Yeah.
They're pretty, actually, they're very certain. A lot of religious people are very certain that they know the answers, which is really comforting to go through life having all the answers, because then you don't have to ask questions.
Yeah. So growing up, what were the answers?
Well, one, that Jehovah's Witnesses were the only true religion.
I thought the Church of Christ was the only true religion.
Oh, you did?
But
No,
anyway,
you
go
guys
ahead.
were way off. I mean, you all came from the same pile of crap, but you're way off.
Way off, okay. So tell me how we were way off. Go ahead.
Jehovah's Witnesses, they actually believe that most people, they believe that most people are not destined for heaven. Well, let me back up. They believe that there is no hell and that the goal is to stay alive forever. Like ever and ever in your current body on earth at this time, because Armageddon is coming like any minute.
Okay.
Now, they've been saying it's coming since the 1880s. They're actually they actually spun off from the Second-day Adventists.
Okay.
And the Millerite movement, which was a doomsday cult in the 1800s. And then one of their founding member, predicted that Jesus was going to come in all of his glory in 1914 with all the angels, and the whole earth was going to see it happen. And then in 1914, World War I happened, but there was no Jesus. I don't know if you noticed, but he failed to show up in 1914. So then they decided that he still showed up, but he was invisible. It's a real convenient way to have Christ come back and be right about a wrong date.
Sure. So he's invisible, living amongst everybody.
Yeah, ruling over the whole earth, actually. 1914 is when Satan lost the war in outer space. I'm sorry, heaven. and was cast down to earth, knowing he's got a limited time left, and he's roaring around like a lion trying to devour Jehovah's Witnesses. All people. And so they believe that only 144,000 people will go to heaven, but heaven's not the goal. They like to use a lot of colloquialisms. So like when people think of heaven, they think about being reunited with their family. Well, what if your family was coming back to life on earth? People think of heaven as physical, someplace, maybe it's on clouds, but they're in a physical body and they're reunited. People don't think about heaven as being spirit creatures with no body and no gender and other spirits, like fourth dimensional type stuff. People think of heaven as like being a paradise, you know.
Yeah, the golden streets.
Yeah, streets paved with gold and, you know, all you could eat and all you could drink and whatever your thing is, you know, which is, you know, anyways. So that's pretty much the big thing. They try to follow like first century Christianity. What they don't realize as an organization is that the unity they experience on a human level doesn't actually exist really at the top. In the sense of they've got this kind of like this ethos or this myth of their leadership, and the leadership doesn't actually match the ethos of the myth. So they've got this image that the leadership are these pious men who represent God on earth and that are God's chosen representatives, and basically kind of interpret or translate Bible prophecy for the common witness. The problem is they interpret their own rules rather than interpreting the actual Bible, right? And they take one tiny verse and they extrapolate all these rules, and they're constantly changing their rules around to match what's going on, and you know, their truth is only you know, temporary at best.
So I would say the word cult is very, I mean, that is a heavy word, because there's a lot of things that people that are listening and viewing like attached to hearing that, you know, you felt like it was a cult. So question.
By the way, I don't even like the word cult.
Right.
I don't. I used it, but I don't like it.
I hear you.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We there's a key phrase amongst a lot of businesses now is, you know, culture.
Right.
What is the culture within your company? Well, the root word of that is cult.
Yeah.
Right. So I just think that's interesting.
Well, I think all humans, Jesus was a cult. People forget to realize like, early Christianity was by definition a cult. They followed one guy around. So it makes sense they'd still be cults today.
Yeah. So you grew up in this strict religious construct. What religious trauma did you experience because of that?
You know, the interesting thing is that the trauma was my own.
Tell me more.
So, I'm trying to think how deep to go. Wow, it. Well, when I was 8 years old, this little girl moved to our congregation. With her, well, her mom moved to our congregation. And my parents were always the ones who had little, you know, the new people came over to our house every Sunday. She comes over on Sunday morning and says, or she comes over Sunday after church as usual, you know, and says, "Hey, do you want to go play a game in your room?" I'm like, "Sure, I love games," you know. And so we went and played Noah's Ark under the bed, right? And I just thought it was awesome. So for probably about 6 months, every week almost, she'd come over. We'd just go play games. And then one morning, I learned to read at a young age, as do a lot of Jehovah's Witness kids. And so one morning, it was my turn to read the Bible, the daily text, and I'm sitting here, and you know, my dad's here, my little brother's here, my mom's there. I'm reading this Bible verse that says, "Fornicators and adulterers will not inherit God's kingdom." And it was like talking to me. Like I knew without a doubt. I mean, I was shaking. I couldn't even finish reading. But I had to read a whole paragraph. And I remember like slowing my mind down to get the words into syllables and just focusing on the syllable of each word so that no one would hear my voice shaking because of how bad I was shaking. And I just slowed my thoughts down and I just finished my sentence and finished reading. My dad goes, "Oh, good job, Jesse, thank you." And then goes on to conduct our little, family thing. And I just sat there just like frozen. And in my mind, I'm like, please don't, please don't, please don't, please don't, please don't. Because, then they're talking about how Armageddon's going to come any day. And everybody who's a fornicator and adulterer is going to be wiped off the face of the planet. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting there in my head going like, is my dad, he's not a fornicator because he's married. And he is with my mom, so that's not adultery. So neither of them are in this category, right? My little brother, he's too young. And then I just started thinking about every single person I knew who were all Jehovah's Witnesses, with the exception of my grandparents, who were not. And they were all going to make it. They were all married, or they weren't fornicators or adulterers, but I was the only person I knew who was like for sure not going to make it. And then, so and it was like a personal execution. So like in a sense, like I was dead. Now what's crazy is we're all dead from the moment we're born. The minute you come on this earth, you signed a contract to leave this mother. But I didn't realize that. No one explained that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so for me, there was this sense of like loss and mourning and separateness that I experienced for my entire life. From that point forward in the organization, when they'd be talking about Jesus died for your sins or Jesus represents you in heaven, I would be like listening, going, yeah, he represents everybody else. He doesn't represent me. So I never had the hope of salvation that everybody else had, because on an intrinsic human level, I knew that I was bad. And so I had to compensate for that by being really good. Right? Then I was compensating. So I was like the youngest kid to do the sound system, and I gave Bible sermons. At the age of 8.5, I signed up to give my first Bible sermon. So like I had to compensate for being bad by being really good. And then, but then obviously that's only a fake presentation, right? Because if you're bad, you can pretend to be good all you want, but you're really bad. You know you're bad. So eventually I turned bad, by my mid-20s. But I had like major depression. I had suicide attempts. I had, all the stuff that comes from being bad and living in a world where you're supposed to be good.
Mm-hmm. So I know you said it wasn't really religious trauma, and thank you for sharing that, by the way. And that you placed that trauma on yourself. However, I do believe it was religious trauma. It was what you were taught. It was I don't want to say programming, but it basically was the programming that you had. Word, yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Growing up until that age, you read, from your daily reading what it said, and that programmed you. True. Jesse, I had the same programming growing up.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You sitting there saying you overcompensated from being bad, and being nice, right, as much as possible, or being good, not nice. You said good. Yeah. I did something similar. Like I signed up to give my first Bible sermon at the age of 10. Yeah, because I knew early on that I was attracted to men.
Right.
And I read in that Bible that supposedly I was an abomination.
Ah.
And I was bad.
Yeah.
So I overcompensated.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I overcompensated till I was, in my younger 40s.
Oh, wow. It's like a year ago? You just
Here you go.
stopped?
Thank you. You're nice. You're nice.
Just stopped.
But yeah, so I mean, it's like you wear. I term it as a mask.
Yeah.
You wear the mask, and it sounds like for you during the forum. Is that when the mask came off?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, because I realized, like the very first thing they teach you at Landmark in the Forum is this distinction of like what happened versus your story about what happened, right? And there's what happened in the physical universe, like in the now, in the present moment, like what was actually happening is two little kids were playing games and some body parts touched. Like that's what actually happened, you know? And then there's the story, which is also another way to say that, is like what you made it mean, right? And I made it mean that God was going to personally execute me at some point in the future, yet to be determined, and that I was going to die, you know? And who made that decision? A programmed, terrified, truly shaken 8.5-year-old kid, right? And then that literally became the hard wiring for the rest of my life. You know, even to this day, I know it's still there. You know, it doesn't just disappear. That became my personality or became part of my background operating system or whatever. You know?
So at what age were you when you took the forum?
37.
Okay. So you carried it around for a while too.
And a half.
37 and a half.
29 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you can, I don't know if you can or not, because it'd be hard for me to even explain, but what is it like when you take that mask off and you can truly like love yourself, be you?
Yeah. Well, at the time, I should also add, at the time, I was 30 days sober and was really struggling with the concepts of, I was 30 days sober and I was facing 20 years in prison. And I was really struggling with the concepts of higher power because I was atheist. And then I would accept the possibility of a higher power and just say, I don't know. Then I'd be agnostic.
Okay.
And then I would accept spirituality. Okay, I'm not agnostic. There's a God. I'm spiritual. And then shortly after being spiritual, boy, now I got to be Jehovah's Witness because that's the only way. So I'd be like, okay, I got to go back and be a Jehovah's Witness. And then like a day later, I'd be like, F that. I'm not doing that, right? I'm atheist. So I had this like cycle of torment of really just trying to like wrap my head around something that I wanted that was being blocked by this. It had been going on for years in a very slow, like monthly cycle maybe, or, you know, semi-annual cycle. There'd be long periods of time I wouldn't think about God or whatever. But inevitably it'd come back to, I have to go back and be a Jehovah's Witness. And on that first day, when the mask came off, or when I really what it is seeing the programming. When I saw the programming, I was like, oh my God, like, no wonder I have such a visceral reaction to having to be a witness, because that was death for me, right? And so I immediately, it was like the biggest sense of relief, like, oh my God, I don't have to react to that anymore. Like, it's not true. I made it up.
Yeah.
I invented it. Like, it doesn't exist. It's not real. You know? So immediately it opened up the possibility of connecting to a higher power, like, of my understanding, independent from society, independent, as I see God at work in my life, whatever that looks like, as it changes throughout my life, right? And being able to have some type of connection or relationship with that God as he works for me, you know, without all the junk that people add to it.
Right.
And of course I go and add all my own stuff to it.
Of course.
Why wouldn't I?
So where are you today on that journey?
Oh boy. It's a great question. What exactly are you asking? Like, where am I? What is my belief of God?
Spiritually, yeah.
Because I've given this, that whole 10,000 hour rule. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I've put like 10,000 hours into thinking about this subject. I mean, how deep do you want to go?
Let's go.
You want to go like off the cliff?
Let's go.
So I believe that there's going to be truth found, like universal truth found, in anything that human beings align with and agree on. So every religion has some type of fundamental type of truth that resonates with its disciples. Mm-hmm. And so you can kind of pick and choose. Pick and choose is the wrong word. There's just going to be truth everywhere. So it's kind of like an amalgamation of a lot of different things. But one thing that comes to mind is, the Bible says that man is created in God's image. Okay, so let's just start there as like a maybe. Then it comes to the question of consciousness. Right? So what is consciousness? Because we can look at animals and we can realize that we have a different type of consciousness than they have. And they seem to have some type of awareness. Maybe they don't have a sense of self like we do. They have a sense of loss. They have a sense of mourning. They have fear. They have happiness, certainly. Right? But do they have the level of like abstract thought that we do? Maybe dolphins. We don't know. You know what I mean? Like there might be some stuff going on with those whales. But like, they don't have tools. So who knows, So I personally believe that God is an infinite power source, like an exponential power source. Human mind understands linear thought. Exponential goes like this because it doubles whatever the frequency is. Mm-hmm. So exponential power would perfectly explain, and I love science. So it would perfectly explain an ever-expanding universe that it is expanding even faster than it was yesterday. And the universe is insanely large. Like it's huge. And it's growing at an exponential rate. Well, there has to be an exponential power source that framework or structure of matter, of atoms, is built on. And so I can only assume that is God, right? That exponential power source. Along with that would come some type of consciousness that's far beyond what we understand. Just like just like the atoms in this TV screen, the little photons of light, they're coming, the lights that come in here, there's photons of light coming. It pales in comparison to the sun. Mm-hmm. Like the amount of energy and light that's leaving the sun is a fraction of what these lights are producing right now, right? So the consciousness we have as humans would be in a fraction of what God consciousness would be like. Now you have to kind of think about what is the nature of the universe itself. Our consciousness, you and me and everybody else, we're playing around in a world that's made up of matter, right? But Einstein proved, and that's how we have nuclear bombs and nuclear reactors and stuff, Einstein proved that E equals mc squared, the energy of matter, mm-hmm. of something, real to us, the energy of that something is equal to its mass times the speed of light squared. Okay? So he literally just goes, hey, look, all matter is energy. Right? And I'm like, oh my God. So matter is energy in solid form, like an ice cube is water in solid form. Mm-hmm. Right? It takes very cold temperature to get ice to solidify. Right? It takes a lot of energy to get energy to solidify. Right? So there's your exponential power source. But that would also mean that So we know that energy functions as a wave or frequency or field, right? It's got a thing, a resonating, a thing, a rippling effect to it.
Yeah.
And then you get into quantum mechanics and things like that, and you understand that all of the matter that we have, quantum physics, I should say, and understand that on the most basic level, nothing is solid and it's all moving. Like the protons and neutrons and electrons are just wiggling around like crazy, and you can't really tell where they are, and the electron's kind of in all places at once until you measure it, and then as soon as you measure it, it's right where you looked at it, but before that, it could be anywhere else. This is why your cell phone works. Cell phone works because they understand the probability of where the frequency of the signal is going to be. They don't know where it's going to be. They just understand the percentage chance of that it's going to be where they want it to be. And they develop something to find it where they think it's going to be. And sure enough, it works. Right? It's how people are watching us right now. It's all quantum physics. Mm-hmm. And it's all probability. None of it's based on 1 + 1 is 2. It's all based on like fractional concepts. So, consciousness, God consciousness, people think of God as omnipresent. He's everywhere. Okay? Well, that would make sense. God knows everything. He's everywhere. Yeah, of course he is. He's literally the substrate that your body's built out of. He's the power source that is literally building matter, which also means that matter is conscious. It's just a different type of consciousness than us. And then you look at consciousness as a wave or a field, and you realize that the animals are conscious. They just have a different type of receiver or transceiver, and their level of consciousness is different than ours. And why would you say that matter is conscious? Well, doesn't matter know how to form itself together? Like, why does metal stick together? Kind of weird. They shouldn't know what's going on, but metal knows it's metal, and metal knows metal. And it sticks together. Steel sticks with anyways, right? Mm-hmm. So if we are I told you that is a fundamental. You can go cut it all out if you want. Just kind of as a basis to understand why I'm going to say what I'm going to say next. Which is, I think of human beings as kind of like cars that have drivers in them and have radios. And if you were a car, your owner would put the key in, and all of a sudden you wake up. Oh, you've been sleeping. Now you're awake. And then you'd go for a drive. Now, if you were conscious on car level only, mm-hmm. You're not conscious of the owner in you. Maybe you feel some discomfort as the owner moves the seat around, but you're conscious on car level, right? And you're driving around and you're looking at other cars, and you might be driving around going, man, yeah, I'm a fast car, or why is that car driving so fast? That car is just crazy. That's a crazy car, right? These crazy cars keep coming up on my left hand. I don't know what's up, or you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm a truck. I'm a truck. I'm different than those cars. Look at that wimpy little. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You'd be comparing yourself to the other cars without realizing what's really happening. And further, you'd be talking all the time. Maybe you're a talk radio car. Maybe you're a podcast car. You're like, oh yeah, I'm really, really smart because I'm a podcast car. And then you're driving around and someone else is like, oh no, I'm a music car. I'm an art car. I'm an artsy car. And that's a heavy metal. I don't like heavy metal cars. I'm a country car. I'm a country car.
Country truck.
I'm a country truck. I don't like your heavy metal car. Mm-hmm. Right? So, and without even realizing that the words coming out of us are really it's coming from a radio tower somewhere else. So when we see a human being and we look at their body, I've only seen a couple dead bodies in my life. One of them was my grandfather. I got there very soon after he died. And I looked at his body and I said, my grandpa's not here. It was just an inanimate object. And I used to do a lot of hunting. And I've seen animals right after they die. They're just meat. The animalness, the aliveness, the animalness, the animation has stopped. It's really like two different things. Like if you see something that's dead versus alive, you could tell there's a big difference. Like it's just not the same thing anymore, right? Because whatever it is that's receiving that signal is turned off, right? And that liveness comes from the source. So that's kind of how I think of God. So like, you know, you could even be two different country music trucks and be listening to the same radio station. But maybe your operator drives at 9 a.m. and my operator drives at 2 p.m. Right? It'd be different type of, slightly different music, different program. We'd think we're individual and unique. In fact, you know, some cars have flat tires in car accidents. Other cars go through life smooth. You know, if your consciousness was on car level, you'd think you're very different from all the other cars. You know, human beings, we just look at a car, we go, that's a car. Right? And then the other way I think about consciousness, it has to do with water. So, like, what is the human experience? What is life? What is death? What is birth? It's the time you leave the factory until the time that you're scrapped. Mm-hmm. And everything that happens in between then is just kind of stories about what happened in between then. Right? Well, where does consciousness maybe go? Where does it go? Where do you go? Well, what are you talking about? Are you talking about all the stories of all the music that you played? Where does that go? Are you talking about your memory of the car accidents you had? Where does that go? Like, what are you talking about when you say, where do I go when I die? Right? So if we go back to kind of consciousness as a whole, and I do believe that human beings experience kind of like a group consciousness, and that human beings, we are all evolving together on this planet, which is why it does matter what you do as a human, because when you improve yourself, you are improving the lives of all conscious humans at the same time. And it doesn't feel like much. And maybe you can't even never going to see the one interaction that you have with someone else that has a whole chain of events that change consciousness, maybe for thousands or millions of people. You'll never know that. You know?
And I think if I've heard of the phrase ripple effect.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's what it's referencing, right? Is, you know, one small thing that you do or say, whether it's good or bad or whatever you're doing, whatever you're saying, it's going to have a ripple effect.
It has to. Mm-hmm. Even if nobody's there to listen to it. Mm-hmm. Because it'll ripple within you. And then you'll carry that ripple out when you leave later.
Your energy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Your vibration, frequency.
Yeah. Because as we go through life, we either have a positive or negative energy. When I went through my divorce, I had a negative energy that I was carrying around.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So now I feel like I'm in a positive space and I carry around positive energy, right? And things are affected by that.
Yeah.
During the divorce, my business was totally affected because I was giving off this positive energy. I remember going out.
You mean negative energy?
Or negative energy.
Yeah.
Thank you. I went out and showed a house, and this client who is very perceptive and intuitive, right? Uh-huh. She walked up to me, her husband and the kids were walking around. She walked up, she's like, "Are you okay?" I didn't tell her I was going through anything. And that's all I needed just to break down at that moment, right? Because I was like, "Oh, no, I'm not okay." But yeah, people can sense the energies that you give off.
Yeah, and we literally have mirror neurons. Like if I smile, your face just smiled a little bit, right?
Sure.
It's automatic.
If I yawn, you're going to yawn.
That's right. Now that's a weird one.
That is a weird one.
That's one I've not figured out. Like that is some deep stuff right there.
Right.
Maybe I should crack yawns next.
So do you believe that there's that there are other beings out in this vast universe that you just spoke of? Do you think that there is another planet that has humans and animals, and what are your thoughts on that? Are we the only ones out here?
Well, what are the odds that you would be in a desert, like the Sahara Desert, and find a single apple? Not rotten, dried out apple, like a fresh, ripe red apple in the middle of the desert.
Those odds are very low.
You would immediately go, who put this apple here?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that would require something from somewhere else, not from the desert, because apples grow on apple trees. So as soon as you say someone put that apple here, well, what you're saying is that there are apples somewhere else, and then they ended up here, right? It would be really weird to be walking through a forest and find a bright red apple and pick it up, because your first thought would be to look around for the apple tree to see where it came from. So my theory...
I'd be looking for the witch from Snow White, but anyway.
Yeah, or the witch, right? Yeah, there's danger in that apple.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know what life might look like outside of what we've got here, but you either live in a conscious universe or you don't. I do find it unlikely to believe that consciousness and free will has only existed for 5,000 years in a 4 billion year old universe. I find that to be hard to believe. But I accepted it as like reality for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a stretch.
Okay, so let's take a turn.
Cool.
Thank you for sharing all that. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in to today's story. You're going to hear the rest of Jesse's story next week on the Matt Hilton Show.
If you'd like to contact Matt or know a fascinating person with an inspiring story that would make a great guest, reach out to the show at themattHiltonshow@gmail.com.